Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this episode of the On the Mark Financial Forum and Podcast. Very excited to have a special guest, somebody that I recently met, but have really grown to like very much, Ron Freeman. So, Ron, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, Mark, I really appreciate you having me. It's weird. I actually do enjoy talking finances and senior living. Something's wrong with my brain.
Well, I that's a great combination because there's a big need for finance in senior living, which is exactly what we're going to be talking about today. So thank you for joining us. Maybe you can introduce yourself and tell us what you do and what your world is in senior living.
Happy to. So my name is Ron Freeman. I'm a senior executive director with Westmont Senior Living. I am managing our building in Napomo, California. We're a medium-sized building. We have about 100 residents or so.
That's great. And so you're seeing in your role, you're seeing all different aspects of it, I would imagine. You're the ringleader, so to speak, where you're seeing the sales side, the operations side, interacting probably with seniors directly to a degree and, in the community. And so you have a lot of perspective on what's happening. And, I would assume you got your ear to the ground, so to speak.
Being an executive director is a very interesting position because, like you say, I am involved in every aspect of senior living for the residents we have and for those that are looking for senior living. You've got to know about culinary. You've got to know about sales. Really need to know about care. Then you also have housekeeping. So you you have
Right.
a number of different departments you're kind of expected to be an expert in. Um, and I'm really fortunate that the directors that I work with are outstanding and they make my life a whole lot easier. But my background, I started in senior living, actually in sales and in being a counselor for people that were looking for senior living. And I'll tell you, 9 times out of 10, finances are a key aspect that we're discussing.
Yeah, well, I would imagine, and especially now, I feel like we're getting into a period of time where the group of people that are aging, the baby boomers, predominantly are a group that didn't grow up with a lot of financial education. I think as a whole, they didn't have financial advisors as often as people nowadays do, and it was a very much like roll up your sleeves and do it yourself kind of mentality. And I think what that is probably leading to is challenges in people being able to afford the current cost of senior living in general. So what sort of challenges? I know you mentioned that finance is such a common thread, but what sort of issues are you seeing from the residents as far as their maybe objections to moving into the community or just challenges that they're having in general with their finances?
Well, you talk about there's a variety of challenges, and one of the big ones, this gentleman named Bob, he was one of my favorite residents I ever helped move into a community, and we became good friends after he moved in. It was back when I first started,
Mhm.
and Bob was 93 years old and was quite mobile for 93. He had a cane, used a walker every once in a while. And when he first toured our senior living community, he toured, and at the end, he says, "Ron, this looks great, but I just don't want to be around all of these old people." I said,
Hey, he's
"Bob,
young at
you do
heart.
realize your average age is your age is almost 10 years more than the average age here." I said, "Well, no, no,
Right.
these people are way older than me." And he's looking at people 10 years his junior. Because I read an article that said we see ourselves 15 years younger than we really are,
Yes.
which means when I look in the mirror in the morning, I don't see any gray.
Right. That explains why I'm still trying to play basketball at 46 and running for the ibuprofen as soon as it's over.
Well, and that's actually another one of the challenges. Big challenges that the seniors, we don't see ourselves old enough to be able to go into senior living. The second is as little financial education as the boomers received. You're Gen X. I'm at the beginning of Gen X. We received even less.
Mhm.
And a lot of the financial decisions that are being made are now being made, they're being made by the Gen Xers
Right.
for our parents who are the boomers.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and financial education is something that's very close to my heart, and that was actually the reason we started this podcast in the first place, which has
Mm.
not only a senior living aspect to it, but a personal finance and obviously real estate and mortgages in general. But yeah, there just seems to be a huge lack of education. We see so many people making really big decisions without any real understanding of what they're doing or why.
Well,
So,
and we'll compound that by the fact that senior living used to be a lifestyle choice.
mhm,
Right. You would choose to move to a community because of the amenities and because you had, all the meals are taken care of. You don't have to take care of your utilities anymore. You don't have to take care of your yard anymore. It's time to relax and enjoy retirement. Where in the past 15 years, it's moved way more toward I'm only moving there when I have to.
right.
So it's
Do
become
you
very
think
need based.
why do you think that change happened? I can put you on
I
the hard to say. That's
No,
a
it's an excellent question. If I look at myself, so you see behind me this brick fireplace. I'm sitting here in my home, and I love my home. I really enjoy being here. I don't want to move from my home. My parents, who are boomers, actually, I just learned my dad's actually not a boomer. He's part of the silent generation.
Hmm.
Uh, they've lived in that home since I was 5 years old. They don't want to move from their home. They
Right,
also don't want to accept where they are in their life journey where they're starting to have some significant needs. So there's denial involved. So there's
yes,
comfort, there's I'm used to this, there's denial that I'm needing any help, which means the decision to move to senior living has moved from, you know, lifestyle choice to, oh no, we have a critical need, we need to do this now.
right.
And I'll ask you, Mark, how many people do you know make wise financial decisions when they feel they're under the gun?
About as many times as I make good food choice decisions when I'm really hungry and I'm 4 hours late for lunch. Not very often.
Let's let's not talk about food and my weight. So when they're under the gun, and so when they come to meet with us, at our community, frequently they're finding out what senior living costs for the very first time.
Right,
And there's some that look at this and go, "My gosh, this is really affordable." There's others saying, I don't know how we're going to afford this, but mom really needs this. And then we run into the scenario saying, mom really needs this, money is tight, and we want mom in the best place possible. And I'm very fortunate that Westmont has the two nicest communities on the central coast of California, the
right,
Oaks at Napomo and the Oaks at Paso Robles. They're not only nice communities, but we provide outstanding service and it's good value, but it still costs a good amount of money. So
sure.
how do we afford this? And now I'm running into people who are saying, okay, we've got to make these quick decisions, and we need to be able to secure, mom being able to be here for as long as she needs to be here, and they have nobody advising them on what to do, how to handle the money.
Yeah, and that's a big part of our challenge as well is when we're helping a family and usually dealing with the adult children in many cases who are helping make those decisions. If they don't have a financial advisor or a tax advisor, sometimes they're making uninformed decisions about big, significant things, and that we're big proponents of people having the proper financial advice, especially if we're going to be giving them a loan and they're potentially going to want to take that money and invest it over time to try to make it last longer, to be able to pay for care for a longer period of time. We want to make sure that they're getting proper financial advice and not just putting that money in a checking account making 0.5% interest, but actually doing something with it to make it last longer. So that professional financial advice is a really key factor for seniors, and oftentimes they're not getting it. So
Well,
that's
you
part of
you bring up time. Time is one of those huge unknowns when we're helping people make the decision to move into senior living.
it. Hmm.
Uh, I talk about it being very need based, right now in the industry. But even when it's need based, we're like, well, how long does the money need to last? Um, the
Who knows?
numbers from a few years ago,
Ron, I think we may have lost your audio. Maybe something popped up on your phone or something.
Mark, I apologize. Can you
Okay,
hear me?
no, it's okay. We're back, and this software is amazing. It actually tells me recording is stopped, but everything up till now has been saved, so we can edit this back together. So let's go back to the right where we cut off just a second ago. So maybe pause for like 2 or 3 seconds, and then we'll be able to cleanly edit it back in.
What was the last thing you heard me say?
Um, I'm trying to remember because I kind of had a moment of lost my train of thought. Oh, you were talking about how people don't know how long they're going to need the care for.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's give it count to three, and then go ahead and go for it.
The statistics from a few years ago said that those who move into senior living will be there about 3.5 years. But that doesn't necessarily work for everyone. I have a resident that has been, in a community for over 10 years. I have residents at the Oaks at Napomo. We've been around for 7 years, and they were founding members of the resident club at the beginning. My grandmother ended up getting vascular dementia, and she had that for 15 years. So when families are trying to plan for, well, how much money do I need? The answer is I genuinely don't know. I can't help with that.
Right. And one of the challenges also, I think, when people look at how to pay for care and they maybe think of a mortgage, they automatically assume when you're doing a mortgage and you're a senior, you need a reverse mortgage because what else is there? That's the only
Yes.
option. And you and I have talked about this before, but to enlighten the audience, there are some challenges with reverse mortgages, but the primary one is if you want to live in some version of assisted living or anywhere outside of the home, you have to pay off your reverse mortgage as soon as you move out of the home. So it's not really a viable option for people that want to be in assisted living and want to have the amenities and the community and things like that they have there. So, there are a lot of cases where reverse mortgage just isn't a viable option, and that's where we can come in. But yeah, it's definitely a challenge for people because of the timing. You really don't know. We heard a story recently about a poor family, 60-year-old husband and wife, and the husband had a stroke, and he might need care for 30 plus years for all we
Mm.
know, and how do you figure out how to pay for that? That was a deep interaction with them and their financial advisor to try to figure out how to do that. And the wife is fully capable and 60 years old, still working, does not want to leave the home, but the husband probably needs to, because home care can be extremely expensive, depending on the circumstances. But she's not equipped to take care of him fully the way that it needs to be taken care of. So
Yeah,
sometimes
that's a
you
that's
have,
a tough
yeah,
situation.
it is. It's a long period of time, a long haul, and I think even when people prepare for senior living, they're not necessarily prepared for the fact that one of the spouses may need it before the other. So you may be duplicating expenses where one person's still in the home and the other one needs to be in assisted living. My grandparents had that situation. And the expenses that you're accruing are now basically maybe not double, but significant on both sides.
Well, you bring
So
up two interesting points. When it comes to being able to afford senior living, a lot of people make the assumption that if I just bring somebody into the home, it's going to cost a whole lot less, right? Because I'm paying for my own food, paying for my own utilities. So clearly, it'll be less to have somebody come in, every day throughout the day, and a few hours at night. That was true 5 years ago.
hmm,
That is no longer true. The state has added extra regulations for the in-home caregiver industry, and you will find that very frequently senior living will be more affordable than having in-home care if you're looking at full-time in-home care.
right. I would imagine that's partly related to the fact that in-home care is really one-to-one. You can't have one caregiver to multiple people if it's in your own home. Whereas in a senior community, obviously, I'm sure you're staffed very well, but you're not going to be one-to-one staff to residents, I would imagine, at least not, as far as caregivers specifically.
You you are correct. But when you also talk about the split needs of a husband and wife, the most difficult scenario that I run into, and I run into it, it's becoming more and more common, is one spouse that needs assisted living who has been caring for their loved one who has dementia.
Mm,
Because you want each of them to go into an environment where they are going to thrive. And when you've been a caregiver for somebody with dementia, there are some fantastic support groups out there. The Alzheimer's Foundation, we even have one at the Oaks at Napomo, a support group. It can be very, very draining.
yes.
But now you're going to pay rent for assisted living and you're going to pay rent for memory care if both are moving in. So you've doubled what the normal fee. You're
Yeah.
going to have care fees for one and separate care fees for another, where it's a whole lot more affordable when a couple moves in together into, let's say, a two-bedroom apartment, and they're able to just pay one rent, then they pay a second person fee that covers basically the food. A lot more affordable to manage that than two separate, complete different
Yeah.
bills, and that is, like I say, it's becoming more and more common.
Yeah. And there's I don't mean to paint a doomsday scenario, because there are solutions, and obviously people get through these challenges. But I think oftentimes people, this is what something that I always notice, is that people look at other types of investments other than their home as something that they can liquidate and use to pay for care or other, family expenses. But they have a very emotional attachment to the home itself, and they don't
Hmm.
look at it as an investment, even though it really is. There's lots of equity built up in most seniors houses, and we often see baby boomers in particular have been, they're come from the generation, like you said, like they've, like I think you said your parents or your grandparents have lived in their house since, for 50 years or whatever it may be. So imagine you bought a house 50 years ago. First of all, good for you, good decision. Because that house is now worth a lot more than what you paid for it. But that can be a bit of a double-edged sword, because if you sell that home to pay for care, you know, what happens is you're going to trigger, most likely, I'm not a tax advisor, but most likely that's going to trigger a huge taxable event. So we had a recent example from somebody in our senior living sphere who told us the story about somebody that she wished had talked to us before she had the chance to meet us. But this 97-year-old woman who was, kind of in failing health, had maybe a year or so left of her life, had a house that she had bought for $50,000 or somewhere around that amount 40 years ago, is now worth $4 million. And I think this was in Orange County or something like that. And the family didn't know any better, wasn't getting proper advice, sold the home to pay for care, and probably wrote an unnecessary $1 million check to the IRS. And probably didn't even realize there was an alternative that they could have tried. But if you finance that home, just even if it's just to buy time to avoid the taxes, I mean, a loan for a year is going to cost you not even 5% of what the check is that you just wrote to the government. And now that money is no longer going to be part of your legacy, other than, somebody at the IRS is going to send you a thank you note. But nobody wants that. Nobody wants to get that in the mail. Thank you for your gift. It was so thoughtful of you. We didn't need it, but you gave it to us anyway, and we're not giving it back. So that's why we want to do a lot of these podcasts and just kind of get that information out there, because the tax implications of selling the home as you're aging can be very significant. Not in every case. It really depends case by case on the numbers, but in many cases it can be a huge taxable event and affect, the your ability to impact the lives of your heirs afterwards.
Well, you bring up a very interesting point. So when you and I spoke last, you gave me a little deeper dive into how a loan off of the home can help, mitigate the massive tax bill. But also, which was fascinating to me, was that, and the last thing you just said, it helps preserve the estate so that the one that owns the home has something to pass down to the next generation
Right.
instead of just selling it, having a big tax liability, and then the money running out. I
Right.
took your what you shared with me to my dad, and my dad loved it. My dad actually is a mortgage broker. And he's
Oh,
like, yes. So he was
my
like,
kind of guy.
somebody that understands. I'm like, well, Dad, I'm not the one who understands. This guy Mark I met is the one who understands. But my father is an extremely generous man, and he has two sons, and he's always talking about how much he wants to pass along. I mean, he knows he's not going to take it with him, but he derives great joy from looking at the estate that he's created and the home, and he's talking to my brother and I. Hey, you need to do this, and you need to do this, and when you get the inheritance and do this. He really wants to pass that down to us and to his grandkids.
Yeah.
And that's something I liked about the whole loan concept instead of just selling your home right away
Right.
is you're kind of giving me a tool to understand how I can better work with my father as he's going to need, senior living. But also, I I'd like a stack of your cards because I hear, families saying, "Oh, well, we're going to sell mom's house, and everything will be fine to be able to, move mom in, and we're happy to do so." And I just keep thinking in the back of my mind, yes, but there could be a better way.
Right. And that's why we're here, is to talk about the better way, because it's the taxes. It's also, we don't recommend that a senior who takes out a loan to buy themselves more time, so to speak, in the home and preserve that legacy, just puts that money into a checking account. We want them
Hmm.
to meet with a financial advisor. We're not financial advisors ourselves, so we wouldn't be investing the money for people. But we know that when you have money to invest, it can grow and compound over time. And depending on how many years the senior has, that can add to the legacy. It can also offset the cost of the loan itself. So if the money we give you from the loan is now growing at a similar pace to what the loan is costing you, you could theoretically pay for care indefinitely, right? There's no timeline. You don't have that issue. And the other strategy that we've talked to people about is, in the event that they're moving out of their home and they know that they're probably not going to move back in, and they want to not have to pay those capital gains, what sometimes families will choose to do is to rent the home. And now you have rental income, and you have the investment income from the loan proceeds that you're investing properly over time, and you can slowly deplete it if you need to. That's what seniors save their money for. They oftentimes want to hold on to that money, but you work your whole life to save up so that you can afford to retire at some point. But renting the property now gives you even more time. And if your rental income is enough, you may be actually paying for some of the care just from the rental income, and you could just keep doing that forever and pay for care as long as you absolutely need it. So
Paying for care from revenue is so has so much more power than paying for care out of your assets.
yes.
When you're when you're spending your assets for it compared to being able to put that money to work, and it's an old it's statement, but when the money is creating additional money and then paying for care out of that, you do mitigate those risks of having somebody have to pay for senior living for a decade.
Right. Exactly. And if it's rental income, if it's investment income, doesn't really matter. The point is you are creating a revenue stream that you didn't currently have or previously have, that now as a senior you need to pay for that care potentially. And so what it does, allows you to pay for care for a longer period of time. It also eliminates the issue of, well, I can't afford the place I really want to be, so I'm going to go to some lesser place where I'm going to be miserable and not have the amenities and the quality of life that I want, and just kind of fade off into the sunset. And that's really sad. Like, when that happens, that really affects people's lives. And especially at the end of their lives, like, that's not how you want people to have to go out, so to speak. And that's
Yeah.
honestly what, like, when we help a family, it's so much more than just giving a loan. Like, it feels different than when we're helping a family just buy a home, in general, with our other side of our business, which is, just helping people buy and refinance homes. That has a different impact. But when you're talking about potentially continuing a family's legacy, giving them an option to be able to keep that home in their family, because there's oftentimes an emotional component to that. Very much so. And people really want to hand down the home. I've had several conversations this week alone. Just people just want to hold on to that home for sentimental reasons, but they think they don't have the ability to, and that's really hard. And I think it's even harder as you're making a big transition from going from your big home into assisted living facility, where probably your accommodations are smaller, I would imagine, than what
Hmm.
you may be used to. That's a big transition in and of itself. And just the idea of accepting the fact that you're at that stage of life that you need the care. And then on top of that, to add the stress of selling the home, preparing it for sale, but also just not having that comfort. There's a certain comfort that people have with just having their home, even if they might never move back into it.
But there's the magic word you just said, and that is a huge factor, in my opinion, in senior living, is the word stress. I have residents that know, hey, I've got my investments. My investments are paying for this. I'm set. I'm fine. And my kids are going to be able to get their inheritance. Their stress is very low.
Yep.
I have other residents that have extremely high stress, worrying exact what you were just talking about. They're worried that their money is going to run out. They're worried they're not going to have anything to pass on to their kids. And they are actively worrying about this on a day by day basis. And that is not helpful for anybody's health.
Right. I would imagine that impacts the just not just quality of life because they're stressed, but also their physical well-being.
I've been through times in my life where I've been extremely stressed, and I can guarantee you, as a young man, it had a physical toll on me. And as we age, our bodies just can't handle some of that extra
Yeah.
stress that we can put upon ourselves. And money, I can't think of a topic that is more stressful for uh, our residents. Money and health.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's what it comes down to, and hopefully we can provide the money solution. The health part will leave up to you to make people feel better, but we can probably relieve some of that stress for the families, and also allow them to pass down that legacy that they're looking to pass down with the home, if that's what that family chooses
Mhm.
to do. And just providing solutions to be able to accommodate the things that people really want to do, I think can relieve a lot of stress. And it's a win for everybody. It's a win for the senior because they get to have the care that they need and want, and the level of care, quality of care. They get to potentially keep their home for, to be able to pass down to the generations. The adult children don't have to pay for it, which is a big fear. I mean, I've got kids in high school, and pretty soon one will be in college and the other will be in high school, and those are expensive endeavors in general. So to think about having to pay for care for my parents as well is I don't know how that would possibly work. Um, so it relieves stress for the families. It allows the communities on the community side to have more occupancy if people have these types of solutions. And obviously, I'm not being, hiding behind this. Obviously, when we do a loan, we have a financial benefit from doing that. But this is not about us. The point is, it helps the families, the whole family, avoid that financial burden. It helps the communities be able to have enough residents to, thrive. Um, and it just presents an opportunity for people to have that legacy that they really want to leave. And that is really a big deal. It's the thing we hear the most. I don't want to sell my home because I want to hand it down. I want to think about how my grandkids will be spending time there, even if I'm not there anymore, you know? And my not to get off topic here, but my grandfather, who passed away like 30 plus years ago, bought a couple properties in Seattle, where I'm originally from, and those properties are still in the family. No one's living there, but they're
Oh,
commercial
wow.
buildings. And so, with the family changing, some people passing away, new people being born, over that period of time, that legacy he left is benefiting family members that he never met.
Mm.
And I just think like that, it just gives me chills when I think about it. It's like such a cool thing. The beauty of real estate is that there is that connection and that benefit that you can pass on. And the tax code is very friendly to doing that if you do it right. But you have to know what the rules are. That's the
Doing
key
it
of
right
for doing it.
is not easy for people like me that aren't as educated as you are in the financial world. Yeah.
Sure. I think you're pretty educated, and you had a father who's a mortgage guy, so you got a leg up.
He's tried to teach me, and like all sons, I listen to my father, and other times I don't. But this is what I see with Gen X is so many seniors will move in, and then the families will talk to me and say, "Yeah, well, we're planning on selling Dad's house, but not right away because, as you said, it's stressful, making any kind of large transition in life. So we're going to wait for a while to sell it. Now I'm going to be able to serve them even better and say, hey, there are other ways. I'm not the expert in it, but here's people you can talk to
Right.
about this. You mentioned, that you're a business. Well, so are we. But the reason that we're in business and we do well in business at the Oaks at Napomo is because we provide an outstanding service that has great value for our residents and their families. We serve both.
Yeah, absolutely.
And again, we're a good value. And from what I hear, what you do, and you get, you're a business, but you're providing great value. You're really helping a family be able to preserve the estate. You're helping the family avoid massive unnecessary tax burdens. The
Right.
families that want to keep a house or property in the family, going down generations, the tools that you have will help them do that. So I don't know. I think it's great.
Cool. The only party that doesn't win is the IRS, but I don't think anyone's going to feel too bad for
I'm
them.
fine with that.
They take a cut of all of our paychecks anyway, every month for life. So, what can you do? But hey,
Not much. You can't
someone's
do
got to
much.
lose. It might as well be the IRS. But no, that's just, and again, we're not talking about tax evasion here. We're just talking about understanding the rules and playing within them to your advantage. So,
Oh,
but this,
absolutely.
yeah, but this is why we do this podcast and why we talk about this issue in senior living, because of all these common threads of what we're seeing with seniors and the lack of knowledge of how the tax code works, especially with that what we call the step up in basis, which is basically the
Mhm.
mechanism that helps you avoid having to pay capital gains tax if you wait to sell the property until after the senior passes. But there's so many nuances to the tax code. It's hard to understand if you don't have proper financial advice or tax advice from the right people. But this is why we do this podcast, is to get this information out there. If we do 100 episodes and it helps one family not
Hmm.
be that 97-year-old woman who sold her house because she needed to pay for 6 to 12 months of care, then mission accomplished. I don't care how many hours of my life I have to do to save that family that maybe I'll never even meet, but I'll save them $1 million, and somehow that information will get to them, then mission accomplished. So,
I like it.
um, yeah, for sure. Well, listen, I think when you work with seniors, you have to come from a place of service, because,
Oh, I agree.
yeah, because seniors are so vulnerable to being taken advantage of. And so I always, my mother is sitting on my shoulder saying, you always take good care of people, and good things will happen. So that's kind of the place that we come from, and my team really emulates that mentality.
Look,
So
we have the privilege of being able to serve those who can be extremely vulnerable and especially vulnerable to financial elder abuse. They
yeah,
need people looking out for them. And I consider it a privilege, and the staff that I get to work with, we consider it a privilege to look out for those that need somebody to look out for them.
yeah, exactly. And sometimes the family either isn't in a position to do that, or the family dynamics are a little complicated, and even the adult children aren't there to help, and that makes it even more so. But
Yeah, or they don't know because if when it's your parents going through this, hey, you haven't had a previous set of parents going through it. You don't know.
yeah,
I used to say when I did sales, I'm like, look, when you go to buy a car, you know it needs four tires. You know it needs a steering wheel. When you go to find a senior living community, you don't even know how many wheels it's supposed to have. You don't know what you're looking for.
Right.
When you're dealing with if I'm dealing with the sale of mom and dad's house or how to use it as an asset, well, they've been living there over 50 years. I've never had to do that before. I don't know.
Right.
And ignorance is fine. I mean, heck, I'm ignorant about a ton of things. But being able to find the people that have the answers to help, that's the secret sauce. That's the part that's actually really hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's hard to find somebody to have your back and to help when you're in that crisis, when you don't know what's going on,
Right.
when you've never dealt with it before and you don't even know what questions to ask.
Right. And imagine you sell your home to pay for assisted living, and maybe you move in for 6 months and you realize that maybe you prefer to be at home for some reason. You know, you don't like the community you moved into. If you've already sold your home, not so easy to age in place if you're in a rental property where, the landlord might sell the house in 6 months, so
Very true.
that home is, you got to do what you got to do to try to hold on to it. And hopefully we can provide some solutions that might be right for some people, maybe not all, but it's an option. So Ron, I thank you so much for your guidance, and I know you've worn a lot of hats in this industry, and you are one of the people we really enjoy talking to because you understand the financial side and the tax implications, and because your dad was a great mortgage guy who taught you well on using debt to your advantage. And this is one of those circumstances where you can really make a big change in a family's life. So I thank you so much for your time and expertise, and I'm really looking forward to handing over all those business cards and helping all of your residents with the same care that we know you help them with every single day. So I thank
I'm
you.
looking forward to it as well. Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, we'll definitely feature you again. Well, I'm sure we'll have more to talk about over time. So thank you
Sounds
again,
good.
and thank you to the audience for joining us for this episode of On the Mark. And we will see you next time. Have a great day.